Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers. Or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course and ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or are looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Hi, this is Charles Max Wood, and I've been asked more times than I can count, how do I stay current? There's a lot to this question, and I'm working on a solution: code badges. That's right, you heard me right. Basically, the idea is that you come and do a code badge, and that gets you an introduction to a topic. Then you can decide if you want to pursue it further. But while working on the badge, you gain enough proficiency to be able to pick it up again if you need. A lot of technology comes through on the bleeding edge, and not all of it sticks, but the principles do. So doing badges on the technologies that will get you ahead will provide you with experience needed to stay competitive. Plus, it offers social proof that you know something about the topic. The project is on Kickstarter right now. You can support it and get on the launch list at codebadge.org. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another My Angular Story. This week, we're talking to Dave Bush. Dave, do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Now, you were on episode 203 of Adventures in Angular.
Right.
We talked about where to store Angular configurations.
Yes.
I think that came out about a month ago as we record this. We're a few episodes ahead, so if people go look back, I think it was released in July or the beginning of August. Yeah,
right. I don't remember exactly. I was surprised at how quickly it released.
Yeah, well, at the time we were where we were basically recording 1 week and releasing the next. So I think we're working on getting a little bit further ahead. So yeah.
All right.
But yeah, so we're here to kind of catch your story, see where you're at and what's going on these days with you. So do you want to just quickly let people know who you are, and then we'll start talking about your story?
Oh, sure. I've been programming for about 30 years, which you'll find out from the interview today, and been primarily, recently in the .NET space, and most recently in the Angular space for about the last 4-ish years. Mm-hmm. Heavy in JavaScript, client-side development, but I tell people I've been doing web development since Al Gore invented the internet.
Nice.
And JavaScript about as soon as it was released. So, but always mixed with back-end stuff. Now it's more just front-end. Yeah.
Yeah, JavaScript's been around for 20-something years now. So.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Very cool. How did you get into programming?
Well, I'm going to need to back up a little bit and take a run at it because it's a kind of a unique story, although everybody's story is a little unique. So I grew up in the days of mainframes and minis and never really had access to any kind of computers other than the fact that my mother was a key punch operator. Mm-hmm. So I got taught how to read the key cards at a rather young age. And that was really my first exposure to anything computer.
Yeah. So we'll just let the listener know, hey, if he sounds a little bit different, because the quality's a little bit different. We had a little bit of a mic issue, so we switched.
All right. So I'll back up with the story. So I grew up in the days of mainframes and minis, and never really had access to a real computer of any sort, other than the fact that my mom was a key punch operator, and I got to read the key punch cards at a rather early age. But that was really my first exposure to anything to do with computers. By the time I got to college, I really knew two things: camping, like summer camps and that kind of stuff, and maintenance. And I figured a major in camping sounded a lot better than a major in maintenance. So that's what I went in for. By my senior year, the PC was just starting to make a breakthrough. We were still in the period of CPM machines. I had friends that were building Z80 CPM computers in their dorm room, and that looked really interesting. And by build, I mean like they were soldering the wires together and flipping.
Oh, wow.
Not like it is today. Really quite hardcore. I went to school at an engineering school, so all of my friends were engineering majors. So my senior year, I'm looking at this and it looks pretty cool, but I went to school on a large portion of grants. So by the time I got to my senior year, I was going to graduate no matter what I did. It was too late in the game to change my major. Jump ahead a few years. I ended up at Radio Shack when the Tandy 1000 came out, and which is one of the first IBM PC compatibles. We don't even really remember that there was such a thing as an IBM PC these days, but that's the thing that started it all. And one thing about the Radio Shack that I worked for in the Chicago area was they encouraged us to take stuff home. So I brought the computers home. I had a Model 100, which was kind of the precursor to what we would think of as a laptop today. Brought that home and played with it. Had a color computer that I played with, and got into eventually programming in BASIC. I'm not talking Visual Basic. I'm talking BASIC with the line. You got to type the line numbers in before you put anything in. And that was really fun. And the next thing you were supposed to learn at that time was Pascal. So I got a Pascal compiler and tried that out. And I honestly could not make Pascal work in my brain. It did not make sense. So the next language you were supposed to learn was C. And I had determined, well, I'm going to give C a shot. And if I can't make C work in my brain, I'm just going to give this whole thing up and, find something else to do with my life. But I picked up C, and C is very mathematical in the way it's structured. And my brain worked that way, and C and I became really good friends. So that's pretty much how I got going. My wife and her family encouraged me to go back to school, so I went to DePaul for a 7-month career change program. It was basically a program for people who already had degrees. So I was able to then skip the whole calculus thing.
Right.
And just get 20 credit hours of computer science courses and a piece of paper that said I knew what I was doing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you don't really hear too much about actual career change programs other than maybe boot camps these days. So
right. It was kind of similar to a boot camp.
Right. Maybe
not quite as intense, but it was, COBOL, CICS, JCL, a little bit of Lotus 1, 2, 3, a little bit of DBase 3, data flow diagrams, which was kind of the precursor to UML and some of those other structured ways of talking about your programming. Yeah, and then they throw you out into the real world.
Yeah, I did a little bit of UML in college.
Yeah, I actually taught UML for a while.
Oh, wow.
I never really liked it, but
I didn't either. But definitely interesting. So at what point did you settle on JavaScript then?
Well, settle. When the internet became publicly available, I wrote my first website in Notepad with the HTML spec printed out in the dot matrix printer, beside me so I could, see what the syntax was. And then when JavaScript came out, I started playing around with that a little bit for some of the websites that I was working on, and just kind of gradually, move it into what I was doing on the front end. But, like most people with, I started out with, at least in the Microsoft world, I started out with ASP to do anything of really any substance, and then ASP.NET when that came out, and the web forms programming and all that, and slowly added in the JavaScript. Right after the .com crash, I had a gig where they had brought me in to fix some bugs, is what they said. It was basically one of those projects that was never going to work.
I've worked some of those.
Yeah. So I came in, and one of the first things that they had me do was, fix a tooltip issue that they had with, cross-browser JavaScript DOM issues. And that was before jQuery or any of those, really big frameworks. It was low-level JavaScript. Why is it working this way in IE and not that way in Firefox?
Right. So you get in, you start kind of folding the JavaScript into your .NET and other work. So are you primarily then a .NET developer, or? I
have been. My career path went from Clipper, which was a D-based compiler, and C. We used C back then to do things that really needed high performance, screen stuff in particular. And then C++ came out, and I did a lot of C++, Borland first, and then I went, I've been a contract programmer for a long time. So I went on a interview with a recruiter, and he said, well, it's great that you know C++, but we can't place you unless you know Microsoft. So I went to the store and bought the Microsoft C compiler, and 2 weeks later, I got a job doing C++ in Microsoft. So not for Microsoft, but using a Microsoft compiler. So a lot of object-oriented there. During the .com days, the .com I was working for, we did a lot of Java on the front end, C++ on the back end. And then when .NET came out, I recognized, particularly with all the wizards that were available to actually get stuff done, that for the enterprise, this was going to be a game changer. And so I really jumped on the .NET wagon at that point.
That makes sense. So this is something that's a little bit outside of what I normally ask, but I'm curious, mainly because I get asked about it a lot myself, is getting into freelancing. So at what point did you decide, you know what, I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to do this for, other people on a contract basis versus holding down a full-time job?
That actually had been the plan all along. I had the mistaken idea that if I were self-employed, that I'd be working for myself. What I quickly found out is that when you're self-employed, that just means you have multiple employers rather than one. But what had happened was I actually got laid off would probably be the proper term. There was a communication issue at best, personality conflict at worst between me and my manager at my last real job. And so he eventually fired me, but he gave me a very nice severance package. So with that, I went and started doing W-2 contract programming. So I was working through agencies primarily at that time. During the .com, I got hired back in to a company. And the way that worked was I told them, so I'm not going to become an employee unless you're paying me what you're paying me as a contractor. And they said, no problem. So everything else that I was doing still looked like a contractor. So I still count that as contracting time. But it was, that was, a direct contract with somebody I already had met previously. And then after that, the whole .com craziness and the crash, and I woke up one day and said, I could be taking advantage of a lot more benefits if I incorporated at least as an LLC. Mm-hmm. And so in 2000, I switched to LLC and did a little bit more direct contracts and then supplemented with agencies.
Gotcha. So how do you find contracts these days?
Well, the funny thing is, I started working for Bloomberg as a contractor in December. And in June, they converted me to an employee, and it was pretty much the same deal. They made the employee offer attractive enough for me that it was worth converting. I like the guys that I'm working with. So I'm actually an employee now and not doing any contracting.
Mm.
So first time in 27 years.
Wow. So what contributions have you made to the Angular community that you're excited about or proud of?
I would say probably the biggest contribution that I've made is the writing that I've done on the blog. Mm-hmm. I've gotten a lot of, particularly when I started taking it down or moving it over to GitHub, I got a lot of noise about how much people appreciated that. But I had worked as a trainer for about 3.5 years for a training company, teaching other programmers programming, and that's where I learned better how to teach programming concepts to other programmers. And so I kind of took that experience and converted it into articles that I would write for my blog. Some things I wrote were just, purely rants, and other things were, like the article that you picked up that we did the interview on, more of a, how do you solve this particular problem? And I've got several of those on the blog.
Right. So some of the listeners are going to be thinking, and this is something that I also plug in my How to Get a Job book, is building a portfolio, and having a blog is one way to do that. Mm-hmm. So how do you recommend that people get into blogging?
I've been doing it for so long. I think I started that blog in 2007.
Well, what do you think makes your blog successful these days then? Maybe that's a better way to frame it.
Just keep writing. I've been constantly amazed. I'll write an article like, this is an awesome article. People are really going to love it. It's going to get a lot of traffic, and it just falls flat. And then I'll just write something that's, on my heart, and, it just, it's it's time to write. And, one of the things is consistency. Just write every week because you don't know. And like it'll explode. I'll suddenly, get posted to Reddit or wherever. And, suddenly I've got all this traffic that I never expected. So you can't tell. The other thing I would say if you're going to start a blog is if you don't have a thick skin when you start, you sure will when you end.
That's true of podcasting as well.
Yeah. There are people out there that it doesn't matter what you say, you're not going to make them happy. And, some things I've said things that were inaccurate and I've been told in not so kind words that it was inaccurate. But, you learn to, read the comment for the content and not for the attitude behind it. And, take the value out of the comment that you can. Some of them I just plain deleted because I'm like, if I'm reacting to that, that's not the kind of comment that I would want to read going to somebody else's blog. Like mostly I don't even read the comments anymore because a lot of places it's just all of that. But, if you got a valuable comment to add, then I would leave it. Now that I've moved my blog to GitHub pages, I don't even have a comment system because the blog right at this point in my life is just for me. So, if I write so I have some place to point my coworkers if they're asking me a question, how do I do X? I can point them to an article I've already written about it. Or if I do something 6 months from now that I wrote about, 6 months ago, I can go back to the blog and, get the content and figure out how to do it. If other people want to read it, that's great. But really the blog at this point is for me.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So what are you working on now?
What am I working on now? I would say the stuff that I'm working on now is, other than obviously work, I've been trying to come up with, I've been working with NGRX a lot. And I was listening to Ward Bell, trying to explain that a couple of weeks ago. And I'm still trying to come up with a good way of drawing a picture of that I can explain to somebody new to it. Because it's I find that my teaching style in particular is trying to get people to see in their mind something that can't be seen. It really describes programming in general. But I've been trying to come up with a way, aside from describing how NGRX works, of reducing the boilerplate. And I know there are, Ward and John Pava have, their thing to try to reduce that. And there's some other stuff out there, but I haven't found one that really fits what I'm looking for. And the thing I'm looking for is, I have an application that I'm working on at work right now that most of the actions and the reducers and the effects, they all look pretty much the same.
Right.
But they're not necessarily CRUD, which is what Ward Bell and John Papa's thing is targeted to. I would like to be able to use the templating model, you can create templated classes and templated functions. I would like to be able to apply that to more of NGRX. So a templated reducer or a templated effect or a templated action even, but the way the actions are set up, you really need templated modules somehow. So I'm still trying to figure out how to actually get that working. But I think if you can get the template thing working, then it makes the whole rest of how NGRX works a lot easier to code anyhow. You're not like constantly doing what's essentially copy and paste inheritance.
Right. I'm good at that.
Yeah, well, we all are, but I don't like it.
I don't blame you. Yeah. Don't make me think about it, right?
Well, it's not so much don't make me think about it, but if I ever need to change something, now I've got to change it in 5 different places.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what really makes it a bad deal. I've also got a get started book that I wrote before I converted to employee that was originally on Amazon. I took it off of Amazon, posted it on GitHub. Right now it's based on Angular 5. Once Angular 7 comes out, I want to update that book to Angular 7, the new RxJS stuff that just came out that changes how that whole system works with pipes, and add in a few other things that I've learned since, particularly around how NGRX works. And maybe if I figure out the templating stuff, maybe the templating stuff will show up in there. And then finally, the other thing I've been pondering, and this is like long-term goal, but it seems to me that we ought to be able to take the view part of React and mix it with Angular, and like substitute the view part of Angular with the view part of React. So that you've got an option there of which of those you want to use. And I'm very interested in functional programming, which, RxJS kind of gets at, but wouldn't it be interesting if we could use like something like Fable, which is an F# transpiler for JavaScript, and use that to make more of our application actually functional? So those are the things that kind of, sitting in the back of my mind as interesting concepts.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to see just how all of that can come together and really apply to what people are doing. Because, I'm a big fan of making it accessible to people where they're at. And so, I know a lot of people are huge fans of F#. I know a lot of people, the view portion of Angular, there's no reason why we couldn't switch that out for something else, except for maybe how tightly coupled it is into the rest of the framework.
I think the place where you might have trouble is a lot of the dependency injection doesn't mix well with React.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
But one of the things that I do with my code is I put all my logic in a component service. So my view is just rendering data and sending messages out. So I don't necessarily the only dependency I inject into my view layer is that provider.
Oh, interesting.
So I could just new that up instead and probably get around that particular hurdle.
Right. Interesting. So if people want to find you online, where do they go? Obviously, we've talked about the blog, but are there other places too?
Yeah, I'm pretty much Dave M. Bush all over the place. So Facebook, LinkedIn, GitHub. Those are really the primary ones. To be really honest, I'm not really active on any of those. LinkedIn's probably the best one. I've got I'm almost to 13,000 connections on LinkedIn. And so if people want to click to me there, that the value to them to connecting to me on LinkedIn is the way LinkedIn search works is LinkedIn searches for people that are 3 connections away from you. When you do a search, they're not searching the whole LinkedIn universe.
Right.
And so, connecting to people that have a lot of connections already just make you more visible.
Yeah, I think I have 7,000 or 8,000 connections on LinkedIn. So
yeah.
And I accept connections from everybody. So
yeah, so do I.
I'm not very discerning that way.
Yeah, unless you prove yourself to not be worth connecting to.
Yeah, exactly. But for the most
I've got
part,
the same policy on Facebook as well. Yeah.
I post stuff about my kids and stuff on Facebook, so I tend to be a little more discerning there. But yeah. So, but yeah, on LinkedIn, I just figure anyone who's connecting with me is probably a podcast listener. I may have seen their name float by on Twitter or something, but maybe not. And so I just, everybody gets the benefit of the doubt. Right. And that hasn't hurt me in any way. So,
yeah. Right.
But I'm a little bit more careful with my privacy on Facebook, LinkedIn or Twitter, again, it's like, I just don't post my whole life on Twitter. So,
right.
So I get that. Awesome. And if people want to get your book, let's say they're still using Angular 5 or they think they can.
You know what? I'm just going to send you a couple links to those things. So
yeah, just drop them in the chat and we'll get them in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's my, the first one is linked to my blog. And the second one is the link to the book.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Dave,
all right.
For us?
I do, but this week, my picks are my pick, I should say, is a concept that I actually have tried to incorporate into my life, particularly this last year, is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so what that's actually turned out to impact is it's encouraged me to dress a little better, which is kind of tricky. A couple of weeks ago, you had a guy on the podcast who was wearing a suit to work, to shake things up a little bit. And I don't quite go that far, but I'm probably the best dressed guy in my shop. And that's not because I'm particularly, I'm not wearing a suit, but I am paying attention. I try to write clean code, try to keep my office and my car clean. I'm learning stuff that could generally be referred to as better social skills, and paying more attention to my general health. But, just because, the more of that to do, the more of that you do.
Yep. Yeah, I think I've mentioned that concept on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a truth. So, yeah, it's easy to slip back when you get overwhelmed too. And then you just have to say, well, I've got to stick it out. So, yeah.
The other thing is, don't beat yourself up when you slip up. Right? Like my office right now is not particularly clean, and I look at it and I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I won't show you mine. It looks way worse than it is, but I hear that too. It's a lot better than it used to be. And the main thing is that we cleaned out our garage, and I had a whole bunch of old PC boxes in there. And so, yeah, just to give people a little bit of glimpse into what my life is like, or has been for the last little while. And I'm doing much better about it now. But my dad passed away in April, and I wound up getting a whole bunch of, he had like 6 old computers in his storage in his dental office.
Oh, wow.
And my mom's like, I don't know what to do with these. And I'm like, well, I need to make sure that, if there's any data on them, that they get wiped. And, and I'm probably going to set a few of them up as just like little, see if I can play with like home automation or things like that. So I think I'm going to wind up using some of them. But anyway, so they were sitting in my garage, and we cleaned the garage out, and they wound up in my office. So I literally step over 3 computers on my way out to use the bathroom. But I mean, all I really need to do is just, just slide them under my, I have 2 standing desks in here. So I just need to slide them back in the back under there where I'm never going to actually put my feet. And then I can get to them when I have time. But I've got like 4 other things I've got to get through in my office and, and take care of before they're just not high on the priority list. But yeah, definitely. So,
yeah. When our .com crashed, I ended up with 5 gateway computers. So my basement looked like a gateway sales room.
Nice. That's awesome.
So yeah, I've been scrounging parts off of them ever since. I just replaced, I used the video card on my computer up until June. So from 2000 until June.
Oh, wow.
The same gateway video card. And I upgraded it. Like, this is not going to last too much longer. I better replace it before I need to replace it.
Yeah. So are you on a PC then, or are you on a Mac?
I am on a PC. I'm slowly getting to the point where it doesn't matter anymore, but particularly when I was, writing .NET a lot, it was just, it was paying too many of my bills. Yeah,
I totally get it. Yeah, I have a PC sitting under my desk, and then I actually just use my laptop for everything. So I just plug it in and off I go, which is nice because I have the same consistent environment everywhere. But yeah, it's nice sometimes to have a PC. And yeah, I've gotten to the point where you can do a lot of this stuff on Windows, and it just doesn't really matter. So
right.
Because most of my stuff is web development, and so it's just how well my back end runs on my machine. Because Node, I really haven't had problems with on Windows. So
no, I haven't either. And if I did, Windows 10's got the subsystem, so
yep,
not a big deal.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump in here with a few picks. So one pick, and I may have mentioned this on another My Angular story. I've recorded so many of these. Last week I recorded 17 podcast episodes. This week I'm on track to do about 12 or 13. And next week I'm going to be at Microsoft Ignite. So I'll probably wind up recording 4 or 5 just at the event, because that's what they're bringing me out for, is to talk to Microsoft experts. So yeah, forgive me if I've already picked it, but one pick that I have is I installed the Mojave, macOS Mojave beta. The release is scheduled for like a week from now as we record this. But I have this display link pluggable docking station for my MacBook Pro. And it actually runs 3 monitors. And I have 4 monitors here. So Dave's up on the one on my top left, And then I have a web browser open on the bottom left, and that's where I search like what episode he was on and all that stuff. And then I have one up on the top right, and that's where my chat goes. So Slack and Mattermost. And then my bottom right is usually where I have like Visual Studio Code open when I'm writing my book or writing code. So the top left is kind of the catch-all. That's where everything goes, except for, those particular things. The other three have particular uses. Anyway, High Sierra, macOS High Sierra had an update that broke the display link driver. And so then I had to, put like 8 dongles on my 4 USB-C ports in order to make everything work. And so, every time I pull my MacBook Pro out of there, I'd have to, unplug everything, and then I'd have to bring it back and plug it all back in. And it was just a pain. So they let everybody know that if you had macOS Mojave, it was fixed. So I was like, well, I'll just try the beta. And I've been pretty happy with it so far. I had to do a couple of things in order to make it work, and I'll just throw those out, since people are probably going to wind up upgrading pretty soon after this episode comes out, because this episode comes out in like 3 weeks. One is that Visual Studio Code could not find Git, and it turned out I needed to update the Xcode command line tools. So just be aware of that. And if you have Xcode installed, you can just run the command line tools on the command line to install them. If not, you can just go download them. They're not that hard to find. But yeah, that was one thing that kind of got messed up. Homebrew wasn't happy until I updated iTunes to iTunes 10. So if either of those things matter to you, then yeah. But everything else has worked fine. There have been a few things where I got the warning, your app isn't optimized for this version of macOS, and so it kills it. But then when it starts back up, it tends to work some of that out. So anyway, been pretty happy with it so far. And one other thing that I'm going to point out is when I travel, I also use ExpressVPN to mask all my traffic, because I just don't know what I'm sending it over. And I'm too lazy to keep track of, I really care that this stays private, and I don't really care if somebody sees that I'm searching for Microsoft yada, yada, yada on Google. And so I just VPN everything. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm running there. Most of the other traffic that I run, Zoom is encrypted. A lot of the rest of this is encrypted, so I'm not that worried about it. Mm-hmm. But I can never remember, okay, I'm going to log into my bank. Now I need to VPN. No, I just turn the VPN on when I get out there, and I turn it back off when I get back home. So
right. I actually found a really nice app called Encrypt Me that is smart enough to turn itself on and off based on whether you've told that the network you're on is safe or not.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you can just have it always be on if it doesn't know the network, and when you come home and it's on your network, it knows to turn it back off.
Yeah, I wish ExpressVPN's client would do that. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I know where I am. I guess, though, you could also turn the VPN on at home if you don't trust your ISP. But
right.
Anyway. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, too. Yeah, it just encrypts it. But it just encrypts it and then tunnels it. The other thing I like about ExpressVPN is that you can tell it that you want it to look like you're in a particular part of the world. So if you want to watch like British shows, you can tell it to pop out in London instead of New York City.
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, a lot of fun stuff. Anyway, I've babbled for long enough about all the stuff I like. So Dave, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just really interesting story. It's funny because a lot of the people that I get, they've either been on the show and, they're fairly well known in the community. And I think you're somewhat well known, not as much as some of our guests and probably more than some of our other guests.
Right.
But also, nobody really has the experience or the depth of experience that you've demonstrated. And so it's also been nice just to go, oh, okay, you kind of come up through this, and then the web's sort of your second chapter of your career.
Yeah, I've often reflected on when I started. I started with Clipper, which is a D-based compiler. There wasn't really a lot to know.
Yeah.
Right. If you could spell computer, you could probably be a programmer. And now I'm looking at the guys that are starting out. You want to be a full stack developer. You try to get into, there's HTML, there's JavaScript. There might be, some framework that you have to know. And that's just for the front end.
And CSS.
Yeah. And CSS. Yeah. It's crazy the amount of stuff that you have to know just to get your foot in the door these days.
Yep. Yeah. It's wild. Well, and then if you want to do any back end, then you've got the whole ecosystem there too. So
that's what I'm saying. You know, I just mentioned the front end, and then like if you're a .NET developer, there's C# and ASP.NET, and are you going to do MVC or ASP.NET web forms? If you're doing web forms, how about Model View Presenter and all these design patterns that we've come up with? And crazy.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Everybody go check out the episode we did with Dave about configurations for Angular apps. And we'll wrap this up, and we'll catch everybody next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.